Hi there, it's Kate with no glasses. Welcome back to my channel. I am here. It is currently Wednesday, but I am filming a Friday Reads. Hopefully I will get it up in time. We'll see. It's been a little crazy around here. We had house guests last weekend and then again this weekend. And by the way, we just moved in about 4 weeks ago, so it's been a little chaotic. I have been coping by reading when I can. So I have quite the stack of books for the last 2 weeks to talk about, so let's get started. The first one I finished is Adriana Trigiani's The Queen of the Big Time. I filmed a standalone review of that just now, so hopefully I will put that up first. So if you're interested in hearing more detailed, although somewhat rambly thoughts about this book, please check that out. Short version is that I really liked it. If you're into this kind of genre, which is like historical fiction, women's lit type of book, I highly, highly recommend it. If you're not into either of those things, this book is probably not for you. So that's that one. Oh my gosh, and then I finished Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow. This is the second book, the sequel to Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. I actually didn't like this book as much as I liked Nevermore. And I think that, to me, this felt much more like a typical middle grade fantasy novel in which our protagonist is pitted against both other kids and grown-ups and is kind of all alone in this new magical world, etc., etc., just like normal. Like you would see in Harry Potter or in, any other fantasy middle grade book. On the other hand, sorry, my baby is waking up after a very short nap and I'm hoping she's gonna go back to sleep. We'll see. On the other hand, it was still lovely and I enjoyed it, and I will for certain pick up the next book in the series as well. So it wasn't that it was a bad book, it was just that I didn't enjoy it as much as the first, and I can't tell you too much about the synopsis because then that would spoil the first book. So great series overall. Next, so this is called Dragon Breath, Nightmare of the Iguana. This is a book that my 3-year-old picked out of the library and then wanted me to read to find out if it was too scary for her. It was. It was cute though, so I actually requested the first book in the series from the library. So because maybe that one won't be so scary because it's very cute about this iguana and his best friend who's a dragon and there's magic, and it sounds super cute. But this one about nightmares, definitely too scary for a 3-year-old. Next, I finally finished, there we go. This is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and I really liked this monster of a book. I think a lot of books that are like almost 900 pages can feel like a slog, and you can feel like it could have been cut down. And I did not feel that way about this book. This is an epic fantasy that is primarily, I felt, a character study of these different female characters, and I feel like if we'd cut anything out of this book, we would have had some major character development that would have been cut, and it wouldn't have been the same book. And I'm trying to think, a synopsis of the book would be that this is a world in which there are several different like countries or realms that are all governed differently, both politically, culturally, religiously. They're very distinct. And in particular, you have kind of an east-west divide. The West looks more like kind of your European fantasy, medieval European fantasy, in which there's these very Victorian ideals. It's actually called virtuedom. And there are the rulers, or like the leaders, other than the queen, are known as knights of virtue. And so you have like the knight of loyalty and the knight of courage and the knight of friendship, and these are all hereditary titles. And then and they are ruled by a queen, a hereditary queen. And then in the East, you have what we would think of as a more Eastern, I'm going to put this book down because it's really heavy, a more Eastern inspired world in which dragons are gods. Good dragons are gods. For the entire world, this entire world, there are bad dragons, and one in particular, bad dragon, he who must not be named, basically, is imprisoned underneath the ocean and has been there for 1,000 years. The East and West have different ideas as to how that dragon got there, but everyone agrees that if the dragon gets out, then humanity is basically doomed. And throughout the book, the dragons show signs, these bad dragons show signs of coming back. And we see this through the eyes of several different characters, mostly female characters. And then it's basically about how they, are fighting this bad dragon. The thing that I liked the most about the book is that on the one hand, especially in the East, which is where most of the story, although definitely not all, but the majority of the story takes place, in the West, which is this medieval European-inspired world in which we have these, again, virtues. It's ruled by a hereditary queen, and her job is primarily to conceive an heir. Even though she's the ruler, her main duty is to have an heir, and then oftentimes once the heir comes of age, the queen will abdicate. So this is not a long ruling queen by any means. They usually have just one daughter, that's it, and they abdicate the throne, and then it's time for a new daughter to take place. For 1,000 years this has happened. So on the one hand, you have these very traditional gender roles. On the other hand, you have these very specialized, highly trained, and highly deadly female fighters whose job it is to protect not only, not just like, for example, there's a fighter who is assigned to this queen of virtudom. And so her job is not only to fight and protect this queen, but it's basically to defend the entire realm against dragons. And I don't think that's a spoiler. I think that that's pretty clear from the beginning. It might be a tiny bit of a spoiler, but not really. And so you have these women that, on the one hand, are very much women. They are very feminine. They have very feminine wants and desires and goals in life. But on the other hand, they are fierce and they are strong, and that is accepted in the society alongside the females who are playing these very traditional gender roles. So I thought that was really interesting. So on the one hand, we're both upholding and subverting gender roles at the same time, and I thought that was an interesting play on what gender can do. The one complaint that I have about this book, and this may be kind of just because of the way that I am as a reader, I tend to skip sentences, I tend to skim often, and that was okay for most of this book, but the action sequences were so succinct. This is mostly 800 pages of character development. The action scenes are very, very small. They're important, but they're very, very small, and I found them hard to follow because I just didn't understand how the magic was working sometimes in the fight scenes. I didn't understand how, a character would get to be just in the right place at the right time to do something. It was hard for me to follow. However, that did not detract from the story for me at all. I still really, really enjoyed it. If high fantasy is your thing, if strong female, different takes on femininity is your thing, there's also several same-sex relationships in here. It's a very, like, on the one hand, you're talking very medieval types of virtues and values, but on the other hand, it's totally okay to be gay. So it's just a really interesting world. So I recommend it if those are your things. knowing that dragons are not everybody's thing. So yeah, great monster of a book. And then the final book that I finished, you guys, was amazing. This is Finding Dorothy by Elizabeth Letts. This is about Maud Baum, the wife of L. Frank Baum, and this is a novel. And how she, one, it tells the story of her life, and then the other timeline is her in Hollywood working with Judy Garland to make sure that the movie, The Wizard of Oz, stays true to the vision of Baum himself. And if you're like me, and you, especially I think if you're like me and you love the books long before you love the movie of The Wizard of Oz, this book will strike a chord in your heart and it make you love it even more. There's a lot that I didn't know, especially about Maud Baum. I didn't know a thing about her. I didn't realize that she was the daughter of Matilda Gage, who was a leading suffragist in the United States. I didn't know anything. I didn't know a lot about Baum himself and how kind of the struggles that he went through before becoming a writer, before publishing these stories. It's beautiful. It really gives you an insight into the story that you, I mean, I thought I knew the story of The Wizard of Oz, but now I'm looking at it in a whole nother way, which is great because I listen to the story at least twice a week in the car, over and over again, because my 3-year-old is obsessed. So I loved it. I think that this book would be better if you have both read the book and seen the movie. I think you could read it without having read the book, but I don't think that it would be as good. It also helped that that last year I read Prairie Fires by Carolyn Fraser, the story of Laura Ingalls Wilder, because a lot of the experiences that the Baums had in South Dakota, mirrored what happened with Laura Ingalls Wilder's family. And in fact, Fraser references Baum as kind of as an example of literature that came from the prairie and the struggles that people felt on the prairie. So those two, so that helped also with my understanding of what was going on in that part of their story. So I loved it. I highly recommend it. I will be purchasing a copy of this. I got this one from the library, but I will definitely be purchasing a copy of this for my library at home because it was beautiful. And then, of course, I immediately had to pick up the L. Frank Baum, creator of Oz, biography because I'm now hooked on knowing more. It's possible that my 3-year-old gets her obsessive tendencies from me. It's entirely possible, but this is just a biography of L. Frank Baum himself. This is very dense. This is by Catherine Rogers, who is an academic, and you can tell. It's not super academic, but it's definitely not a narrative, if you know what I mean. Like, this is not a story that she's telling, this is facts. So it's interesting. It's just a little bit harder to read. I am not super far into it. I actually just, I don't know if you can see, I just started this chapter, or I'm just about to start chapter 4, which is actually the writing of, or what happens after The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is published. So I'm excited to go into that. So basically, where I am in this book now is where this book ends on that timeline. So I think these two books are going to complement each other very nicely. Other than that, on my Kindle, I'm reading The Widows of Malabar Hill as my what to read while I'm putting the baby to sleep because it takes forever. But that's it. That's a lot of books for this week. Let me know if you have read any of these or if you're interested in any of them. Let me know what you're reading or what you've been reading the last couple weeks. And I will talk to you later. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Bye.